The shuttle docked with a soft thump, and Velketh felt his 4 hearts beating faster than they should. He was a scholar, a cultural observer for the Tendori Collective, and he had spent 30 cycles studying species across the galaxy. He had walked among the proud Velthari, dined with the calculating Morvex, and even survived a month with the aggressive Krath. None of those assignments had made him nervous, but this was different. This was a human ship. The airlock hissed open, and Velketh stepped through on his 6 legs, his forearms folded politely against his scaled chest. The corridor beyond was brighter than he expected, with clean white walls and soft lighting that did not hurt his sensitive eyes. He had prepared himself for something darker, something more fitting for the species that the galaxy whispered about in fearful tones. A young human male stood waiting for him. The creature was small by galactic standards, with soft skin the color of light sand and short brown fur on top of his head. He wore a simple blue uniform with a patch on his shoulder showing a ship surrounded by stars. His mouth curved upward in what Velketh knew was called a smile. "You must be Observer Velketh," the human said, extending one of his 2 hands. "I'm Danny Vance, Communications Officer. I'll be your liaison during your stay with us." Velketh reached out with his lower right hand and allowed the human to grip it briefly. The gesture was called a handshake, and humans used it as a greeting. Danny's grip was gentle, careful not to squeeze too hard. This surprised Velketh. He had expected roughness. "Thank you for receiving me," Velketh said, his translator turning his clicking speech into human words. "I am honored to be aboard your vessel." Danny laughed softly. It was a pleasant sound, without any edge of mockery. No need to be so formal. "We're pretty relaxed around here. Come on, I'll show you to your quarters first, and then the captain wants to meet you." They walked through the corridors together, and Velketh observed everything with careful attention. Human crew members passed them, nodding politely or offering quick words of greeting. Some of them looked at Velketh with curiosity, but none showed fear or hostility. A female with red fur on her head smiled at him and said, "Welcome aboard." Somewhere in the distance, Velketh heard music playing, a gentle melody with a rhythm that was almost soothing. This was not what he had expected at all. The Tendori Collective had been studying humans for nearly 50 cycles, ever since the strange species had burst onto the galactic stage with their loud ships and their confusing diplomacy. Other species had warned the Tendori about them. The Velthari called humans unpredictable and dangerous. The Morvex said they were emotional creatures who could not be trusted to act rationally. The Krath, who feared nothing, admitted quietly that they preferred not to fight humans if it could be avoided. And yet here was Danny Vance, chatting happily about the ship's recreation facilities and asking Velketh if he had any dietary restrictions. Here were crew members laughing together in a doorway, sharing what appeared to be a joke. Here was music and soft lighting, an atmosphere of calm contentment. Velketh's quarters were small but comfortable, designed to accommodate his non-human body. Someone had clearly done research and prepared the room with care. The sleeping platform was the right size for his frame, and the temperature controls had been set to match Tendori preferences. There was even a small selection of Tendori literature loaded onto the room's data terminal. "We tried to make it feel like home," Danny said, watching Velketh examine the room. "Let me know if you need anything adjusted." "This is very thoughtful," Velketh said slowly. "I did not expect such consideration." Danny's expression shifted slightly, becoming something more complicated than a simple smile. "Yeah, I know what other species say about us. We've heard the stories. Honestly, we understand why they're nervous. We make ourselves nervous sometimes." He shrugged, a gesture that Velketh had learned indicated uncertainty or acceptance. "But we try to be good hosts. Ready to meet the captain?" The captain's office was near the bridge, a modest room with a wide window showing the stars beyond. Captain Claire Dunham stood as Velkith entered, and he studied her carefully. She was of medium height for a human female, with dark skin and black fur that she kept cut very short. Her eyes were brown and sharp, taking in details with quick intelligence. She moved with the controlled grace of someone who was comfortable with authority. "Observer Velkith," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Welcome to the Steadfast. I hope your journey was comfortable." "It was, Captain. Thank you for accepting my request to observe your crew." Claire gestured for him to sit as she settled into her own chair across from him. Danny remained standing near the door, quiet but attentive. "The Tandoori Collective has always been fair to humanity," Claire said. "When other species wanted nothing to do with us, your people were willing to talk. We don't forget things like that. So when your government asked if a scholar could spend time aboard one of our ships, I volunteered the Steadfast." Velkith tilted his head, a gesture of acknowledgement among his people. "I must be honest with you, Captain. My purpose here is to understand your species better. There are many questions about humans among the galactic community. You want to know if we're monsters they say we are," Claire said directly. There was no anger in her voice, only a kind of tired acceptance. "I want to know the truth," Velkith replied carefully. "Whatever that truth may be," Claire nodded slowly. "Fair enough. You'll have full access to the ship, Observer. Talk to whoever you want, go wherever you want. We have nothing to hide." She paused, and something flickered in her eyes, something old and heavy. "But I'll give you some advice. Don't judge us by peaceful days alone. Anyone can be kind when nothing is wrong. If you want to understand humans, you need to see us when things go bad." At the time, Velkith did not fully understand what she meant. He thanked her for her openness and followed Danny back into the corridor, his mind already organizing the observations he would record that evening. The Steadfast was scheduled for a routine patrol along the border near Kethver space. The Kethver were raiders and slayers, preying on colony worlds and shipping lanes. They were cruel but cowardly, dangerous only to those weaker than themselves. Velkith noticed how human faces changed when the Kethver were mentioned. The smiles faded. The eyes grew harder. But no one said anything beyond the basic mission parameters. That night, in his comfortable quarters with the soft lighting and the carefully prepared accommodations, Velkith recorded his first observations. The humans of the Steadfast seemed unremarkable, he noted. They were polite, organized, and surprisingly gentle. Perhaps the stories had been exaggerated. Perhaps humans were simply misunderstood. He would later look back on those words and wonder how he could have been so blind. The days aboard the Steadfast settled into a comfortable rhythm that Velkith had not anticipated. He woke each morning to the soft chime of the ship's day cycle beginning, ate his meals in the common area with the crew, and spent his hours wandering from department to department, watching and learning. The humans accepted his presence with remarkable ease. After the first few days, most of them stopped noticing him at all, which was exactly what Velkith wanted. A good observer became invisible, and invisible observers saw the truth dot in the medical bay. He spent long hours with Dr. Linda Marsh, a woman with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes that somehow still held warmth. She showed him their healing technologies, explaining how they could mend broken bones and repair damaged organs. She spoke of her work with casual pride, describing complicated procedures as simply as if she were discussing the weather. "Everyone deserves a chance to heal," she told him once, while treating a young crew member who had cut his hand on a piece of equipment. "That's the whole point of medicine. We fight against suffering, one patient at a time." Velkith watched her hands move with gentle precision as she sealed the wound. The patient, a nervous boy barely old enough to serve on a starship, thanked her with obvious relief. Linda patted his shoulder and told him to be more careful next time. And there was such simple kindness in the gesture that Velketh felt something shift in his understanding in engineering. He met Pete Cobb, a large man with rough hands and a gruff voice that hit a patient teacher. Pete spent hours explaining the ship's systems to Velketh, drawing diagrams on data pads and using small objects to demonstrate how the engines worked. He never seemed annoyed by Velketh's questions, even the foolish ones. "Everyone starts somewhere," Pete said when Velketh apologized for taking so much of his time. "I didn't know anything when I first came aboard a ship. Someone took the time to teach me. That's how it works. We pass it on." The crew of the Steadfast passed many things on to each other, Velketh discovered. Knowledge and skills, yes, but also stories and jokes and small kindnesses. He watched crew members share food from home, trade books and music, and offer comfort when someone was struggling. There was a network of connection running through the ship, invisible but strong, binding these humans together in ways that the Tandoori collective had never quite managed with their own people. Danny Vance remained his closest contact, always willing to explain human customs and answer questions that might have seemed strange or intrusive from anyone else. They developed something that Velketh could only call friendship, though he was not entirely sure the word applied between species. One evening, they sat together in the observation lounge, watching the stars slide past the windows. Danny had brought a bottle of something he called beer, a mild human intoxicant that Velketh's biology could tolerate in small amounts. They drank and talked, and the conversation turned philosophical. "Your people live so individually," Velketh observed. "Each human seems to carry their own world inside them. Among the Tandoori, we share everything. Our thoughts, our feelings, our purpose. But you each stand alone." Danny considered this, tilting his bottle slowly. "Not alone, exactly. We're connected too, just differently. We choose our connections. Family, friends, crew. We build bonds instead of being born into them." He smiled a little sadly. "It's harder, maybe. But when someone chooses to stand with you, it means more because they didn't have to. And yet your history is full of conflict," Velketh said carefully. "Humans fighting other humans. Terrible wars. Great cruelty, yeah." Danny's smile faded. "We've done awful things to each other. Things that keep me up at night sometimes, just knowing that we're capable of them." He met Velketh's eyes directly. "We scare ourselves, observer. That's the truth. We know what we can become. Every human carries that knowledge around like a weight." "Then why?" Velketh hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Why are you so gentle now? This ship, these people, everyone has been kind to me." Danny took a long drink before answering. "Because we choose to be. Every day, every moment, we make that choice. To be better than our worst instincts. To build instead of destroy." He shrugged. "It doesn't always work, but we keep trying." The next week, the Steadfast received word that a crew member's father had died back on Earth. The woman was named Katie Price, a young ensign who worked in navigation. Velketh had spoken to her several times, finding her bright and eager and full of questions about Tandoori culture. Now she sat in the common area, crying silently while crew members gathered around her. No one said much. Captain Claire Dunham sat beside her for almost an hour, not speaking, just present. Others brought food that Katie did not eat and drinks that she barely touched. They stayed anyway. Velketh watched from a distance, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. Among the Tandoori, death was a collective experience, shared across the network of minds. The grief was distributed, made bearable by spreading it thin. But humans had no such network. They carried their grief alone, heavy and whole. And yet, they did not leave Katie alone with it. They could not take her pain away, but they sat with her in it, offering their presence as the only comfort available. 3 days later, there was a birthday celebration for another crew member. Velkith expected the mood to be subdued, given the recent loss. Instead, the common area filled with laughter and music and a strange ritual involving a sweet food item with small flames on top. Kitty Pryce was there, still sad but smiling a little as she sang with the others. How can they shift so quickly? Velkith asked Danny, genuinely confused. From grief to celebration? We hold both, Danny replied. That's the human way. We don't stop living because we're hurting. We carry the hurt with us and keep moving. The joy doesn't erase the grief, and the grief doesn't cancel the joy. They exist together. Velkith recorded this observation carefully, marking it as significant. Humans, he wrote, contain contradictions. They hold opposing emotions simultaneously in a way that seems impossible to other species. This may be key to understanding their nature. He thought he was beginning to understand them. He watched their kindness and their grief and their joy, and he built a picture in his mind of a species that was emotional but gentle, complex but fundamentally peaceful. The stories other species told about humanity seemed more and more like exaggeration. Fear of the unknown transformed into myth. He was wrong, of course. He would learn just how wrong very soon. But in those calm days aboard the Steadfast, surrounded by humans who laughed and cried and celebrated and mourned, Velkith allowed himself to believe that he had found the truth. These people were soft, he thought, gentle. Whatever had made the galaxy fear them was surely in the past. The distress signal that would shatter his understanding was only 2 days away. The alarm came in the middle of the ship's night cycle, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Velkith was in his quarters, reviewing his notes, when the sharp tone made him jump. Red lights began flashing along the corridors, and he heard the sound of running feet outside his door. He emerged to find the Steadfast transformed. The soft lighting was gone, replaced by harsh emergency illumination. Crew members moved past him without the usual nods or smiles, their faces tight with focus. The laughter that had filled these corridors just hours ago had vanished completely. Danny Vance appeared at his side, moving quickly. Come with me. You'll want to see this. They went to the bridge, where Captain Claire Dunham stood at the center of controlled chaos. Officers worked at their stations with silent efficiency, and holographic displays showed star maps and data streams that Velkith could not interpret. Claire's face was calm, but her eyes had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something hard and calculating. What is happening? Velkith asked quietly. Distress signal, Danny replied, his voice flat. Colony called Haven's Rest. Agricultural settlement, about 600 people. He paused. The Kethver found them. Velkith felt cold spread through his body. The Kethver were raiders, slavers who attacked isolated settlements and took captives to sell in the darker corners of the galaxy. They were known for their cruelty, for the way they enjoyed the fear of their victims. Many species simply paid them tribute to be left alone. Commander Ben Harlow, the ship's second in command, approached Claire with a datapad. He was a tall man with gray in his temples and a scar across his jaw that Velkith had never asked about. His voice was low and urgent. 3 Kethver ships in orbit, Captain. Ground forces have already landed. Initial scans show they've corralled the colonists in the central plaza. He hesitated for just a moment. There are over 100 children in that settlement. Claire's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. How long until reinforcements arrive? 5 hours minimum. More likely 7. And how long until the Kethver finish loading their cargo? Based on their standard patterns, approximately 90 minutes. The bridge fell silent. Velkith watched Claire Dunham process this information, watched her weigh the impossible mathematics of the situation. The Steadfast was 1 ship against 3. Standard military doctrine would say to wait for reinforcements, to not risk a vessel and crew on odds so unfavorable. But in 90 minutes, 600 humans would be gone, sold into slavery across the galaxy. Children ripped from their parents. Families destroyed. Lives ended before they truly began. Claire turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to Haven's Rest. Let them know we're coming." Then she looked at her helmsman. "Maximum speed. Get us there in 30 minutes. "Captain," Harlow said carefully. "The tactical analysis." "I've read the tactical analysis, Commander." Claire's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "We're not waiting for reinforcements. Those are our people down there." Velkith expected someone to argue. In any Tandoori vessel, such a decision would be debated, analyzed, reconsidered. The collective would weigh the risks against the benefits, calculating acceptable losses with careful precision. No one on the Steadfast argued. No one questioned. Every officer simply turned to their station and began working faster. Claire noticed Velkith standing near the back of the bridge. For a moment, something almost apologetic flickered across her face. "You wanted to see the truth about humans, Observer. Stay and watch. But stay out of the way." Velkith pressed himself against the wall and observed. The transformation he witnessed over the next 30 minutes would haunt his dreams for cycles to come. These humans who had celebrated birthdays and mourned lost fathers, who had shared jokes and taught him about their engines with patient kindness, became something else entirely. Their faces did not show anger or fear. They showed nothing at all. Every expression smoothed into blank efficiency. Every movement became precise and purposeful. They spoke only when necessary, in clipped phrases that conveyed maximum information in minimum time. The laughter was not just absent. It was as if it had never existed. Danny Vance sat at his station, monitoring communications with hands that were perfectly steady. His friendly eyes had become flat and cold, focused on his displays with absolute concentration. When Velkith caught his attention briefly, Danny looked at him without recognition, as if they had never shared drinks and philosophy in the observation lounge in the corridors beyond the bridge. Velkith could hear the sound of the Marine Company preparing for ground assault. Equipment being checked. Weapons being loaded. No one spoke louder than necessary. The ship hummed with a terrible, focused energy that made Velkith's scales itch. The Steadfast dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Haven's Rest system, and the tactical display immediately populated with enemy contacts. 3 Kethver warships, each nearly as large as the Steadfast, hung in orbit above the colony world. They had not expected anyone to respond so quickly. They were not prepared. "All weapons charged," the tactical officer reported. "Enemy shields are at standby levels." Claire Dunham stood at the center of her bridge, perfectly still except for her eyes, which moved across the displays with rapid calculation. When she spoke, her voice was the coldest thing Velkith had ever heard. "Target the nearest ship. All forward batteries, fire." The Steadfast unleashed its weapons with devastating precision. The first Kethver vessel barely had time to raise its shields before the bearers tore through its hull. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface as critical systems failed. The ship began to drift, venting atmosphere and debris into the void. The other 2 Kethver ships scrambled to respond, their weapons coming online, their shields flickering to full power. They were larger than the Steadfast. They had more guns. By any reasonable calculation, the human ship should have retreated, should have used its surprise attack to buy time and fall back to wait for reinforcements. Instead, Claire Dunham ordered her ship directly into their formation. "What is she doing?" Velkith breathed, unable to stop himself. Ben Harlow, standing nearby, answered without looking at him. "Winning." The battle that followed defied everything Velkith understood about warfare. The Steadfast took hits that would have sent other ships retreating. Damage reports came in constantly, hull breaches and system failures and casualties mounting. Claire acknowledged each report with a nod and continued pressing the attack. She was trading damage for damage, accepting wounds to her own ship in exchange for killing blows to the enemy. It was not just aggressive. It was reckless by any reasonable standard. It was the strategy of someone who did not care about their own survival, only about destroying their opponent. When one Kethver ship tried to flee, tried to run for the edge of the system where it could escape to faster than light, Claire pursued it with relentless determination. She ran down the fleeing vessel like a predator chasing wounded prey, pouring fire into its engines until it could no longer run, then continuing until there was nothing left but wreckage. Then she turned back to finish the last ship. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, 3 Kethvar vessels were destroyed, and the Steadfast hung in orbit above Haven's Rest, wounded but victorious. Marine transports launching, someone reported. Ground assault beginning. Claire finally allowed herself to sit in her command chair. Her face was still expressionless, but Velkith noticed a fine tremor in her hands that she quickly suppressed. She had just risked everything, her ship and her crew and her own life, on an attack that should have been impossible, and it was only beginning. "Observer," Claire said quietly, not looking at him. "What happens next will be worse. You may want to look away." Velkith did not look away. He watched the tactical display as human marines descended to the surface, and he prepared himself for what he was about to witness. He was not prepared. No one could have been. The tactical display showed the marine transports descending through the atmosphere of Haven's Rest like falling stars. Velkith counted 47 human soldiers in those transports, facing an estimated 200 Kethver ground forces. The numbers were impossible. The Tandori would never have approved such an assault. No rational species would have. But humans, Velkith was learning, did not always operate on rational calculations. Combat footage began streaming to the bridge, projected on secondary displays for command staff to monitor. Velkith found himself drawn to these images, despite the horror building in his chest. He had asked for truth. He was about to receive it. Lieutenant Marcus Kane led the ground assault. Velkith recognized him from the ship's mess hall, a quiet man with dark hair and thoughtful eyes who spent his free time reading poetry and playing a stringed instrument. He had seemed gentle, artistic, the kind of soul that valued beauty and peace. That man was gone. The creature commanding the Marines moved through the colony streets with mechanical precision, his voice issuing orders in sharp, clipped tones. His face showed nothing at all, not anger, not fear, not satisfaction, just empty focus, like a machine designed for a single terrible purpose. The Kethver had taken defensive positions throughout the colony, using the captured civilians as shields and bargaining chips. It was their standard tactic, effective against species that valued individual lives and hesitated to cause collateral damage. The humans did not hesitate. They moved through the streets in coordinated teams, covering angles, advancing in patterns that Velketh's military training could barely follow. When they encountered Kethver resistance, they eliminated it with brutal efficiency. No warning shots, no demands for surrender. Just precise, deadly fire that dropped enemies before they could react. A Kethver commander tried to use a group of colonists as human shields, pressing a weapon to a young woman's head and screaming threats. The human response came so quickly that Velkith almost missed it. A single shot from a Marine sniper removed the Kethver's head while the woman was still screaming. She collapsed to the ground, covered in alien blood, and the Marines moved past her without pausing. "They're not even checking on the civilians," Velkith said, his voice barely a whisper. "They will," Danny Vance replied from his station. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Right now, the mission is eliminating the threat. Everything else comes second. Velkith watched the Marine take a hit to his chest armor and fall. The soldier behind him did not stop. He stepped over his fallen comrade's body and kept moving forward, kept firing, kept advancing. Later, much later, there would be time to mourn. But not now. Now there was only the mission. The Kethver, for all their cruelty, were not soldiers. They were raiders, accustomed to attacking the weak and running from the strong. They had never faced anything like this. Never encountered an enemy that advanced into certain death without flinching, that took casualties and kept coming. That showed no fear, because fear had been burned away by something far more powerful. Velkith saw the moment when the Kethver broke. It happened all at once, like a wave collapsing. One moment they were fighting, and the next they were fleeing, scrambling over each other in their desperation to escape the humans hunting them. Through the streets, some of them tried to surrender. They threw down their weapons and raised their appendages in the universal gesture of submission. They screamed please in their guttural language, begging for mercy. The tactical display showed Lieutenant Kane approaching a group of surrendering Kethver near the colony's central plaza. His Marines formed a perimeter around them, weapons trained on the cowering aliens. Kane's voice came through the communication channel, calm and cold. "Captain, we've secured the holding area. Colonists are alive, approximately 560 accounted for. But we found the ones who didn't make it." There was a pause. "They killed everyone who resisted. 17 dead, Captain, including 6 children." The bridge of the Steadfast went absolutely silent. Velkith watched Claire Dunham's face and saw something flicker there, something ancient and terrible rising to the surface. Her hands gripped the arms of her command chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Understood, Lieutenant," she said. Her voice was perfectly controlled, but there was something underneath it now. Something that made Velkith want to flee the bridge and hide in his quarters. "Captain," Kane continued, "the Kethver are requesting terms of surrender." The silence stretched. Every officer on the bridge had stopped what they were doing. They were all looking at their captain, waiting. Claire Dunham did not respond to the request. She simply said, "Carry out your duties, Lieutenant." "Understood, Captain." The communication channel stayed open. Velkith heard what followed, the sounds of weapons fire and Kethver screaming, and he understood finally what he was witnessing. This was not warfare as he knew it. This was not combat between opposing forces. This was extermination. The humans did not take prisoners that day. Danny Vance had turned away from his station, his head bowed. His hands were shaking now, the mask of cold efficiency cracking just slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "We're not proud of what we can become, Observer. But we are what we are." The ground operation continued for another 2 hours. Marines swept through every building, every hiding place, hunting down Kethvar who had fled into the colony's infrastructure. Medical teams deployed to tend to the surviving colonists and the gentle. Healing humans that Velkith had met aboard the Steadfast began their work alongside the killers who had just finished theirs. Velkith watched. Dr. Linda Marsh treating a child who had been beaten by Kethver guards. Her hands were just as steady as they had been in the ship's medical bay, her voice just as soothing. It was as if the violence happening around her existed in a different universe, one that she could acknowledge without allowing it to contaminate her purpose. How could they do both? How could these humans shift from killing to healing, from violence to compassion, without any visible transition? The Tendori could not have managed it. The Tendori would have been broken by such contradictions. But humans were not broken. They simply contained multitudes. By the time the sun set on Haven's Rest, the Kethver presence had been eliminated completely. Not defeated, not driven away, eliminated. 200 raiders had landed on this colony world expecting easy prey. and none of them had survived to escape. The Steadfast maintained orbit through the night, coordinating relief efforts and preparing to receive colonists who needed medical care beyond what the ground teams could provide. Claire Dunham finally left the bridge after nearly 14 hours, her face gray with exhaustion. She paused near Velkith on her way out. "Now, you know," she said quietly. "Now you've seen what we are." Velkith found he could not respond. His voice had abandoned him, lost somewhere in the horror and awe of what he had witnessed. Claire nodded as if his silence was answer enough, and she walked away to find whatever rest she could. Velkith remained on the bridge until the artificial dawn cycle began, watching the planet below and trying to understand the species that had claimed it. They had come to rescue strangers, risk their lives against impossible odds, and then committed acts of violence that would give him nightmares for cycles. And tomorrow, he knew, they would go back to playing cards and celebrating birthdays and discussing philosophy over bottles of beer. That was the terrifying thing. Not the violence itself, but the way it existed alongside everything else. The way humans could hold such darkness within them and still choose to be kind. Velkith began to understand why the galaxy feared them. 3 days had passed since the battle at Haven's Rest. The Steadfast had transferred the most seriously injured colonists to a hospital ship that arrived with the reinforcements. And now the vessel was making its way back to regular patrol routes. Life aboard the ship had returned to something like normal. That was what disturbed Velkith most of all. The crew members who had fought and killed on the colony surface were back to their usual routines. Pete Cobb worked in engineering, explaining technical problems to his junior staff with patient humor. Dr. Linda Marsh treated minor injuries and chatted with her patients about their families. Marcus Kane, the lieutenant who had led the ground assault, sat in the mess hall reading poetry on his datapad, his face peaceful and contemplative. They had not forgotten what happened. Velkith could see it in the shadows behind their eyes, in the moments of silence that fell at unexpected times. They carried the weight of it, but they did not let it crush them. They simply continued living. Velkith had not left his quarters for 2 days after the battle. He had tried to process what he witnessed, to fit it into his understanding of the universe, but it refused to make sense. The general species he had observed, the violent creatures he had seen them become, they could not be the same beings. And yet they were. On the 3rd day, Danny Vance came to find him. The young communications officer stood in the doorway of Velkith's quarters, looking tired but concerned. The easy smile was back on his face, though it seemed more fragile than before. "You've been hiding," Danny said. It was not an accusation, just an observation. "I have been thinking," Velkith replied, "trying to understand." Danny nodded and stepped into the room, settling onto a small bench near the door. "Do you want to talk about it?" Velkith considered the question for a long moment. Did he want to talk? He was not sure, but he needed answers, needed to make sense of what he had seen. So he asked the question that had been consuming him. How do you do it? How do you contain such violence within yourselves and still laugh, still love, still show kindness? How do you become what you became on that planet and then return to this? Danny was quiet for a long time. He stared at his hands, at the wall, at nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and heavy. "When I was a kid, my grandmother told me a story. She said that inside every human, there are 2 wolves fighting. One is good, kind, compassionate. The other is violent, cruel, destructive. And I asked her which wolf wins." Danny looked up at Velkith. "She said the one you feed. I do not understand." "It means we choose," Danny said. "Every day, every moment, we make choices about who we want to be. We feed the good wolf with kindness, with compassion, with connection to other people. We starve the other wolf as much as we can." He paused, But we don't kill it. We can't. It's part of us, always there, always waiting. And when someone threatens the innocent? Velkith asked. Then we let it out. Danny's voice was flat now, that terrible cold efficiency creeping back in. We opened the cage, and we pointed at the threat, and we let it do what it was born to do. And then, when the threat is gone, we put it back. His hands had started trembling slightly. It's not easy. Some of us don't manage to cage it again. Some of us get lost in there. But most of us, somehow, find our way back to the light. Velkith processed this slowly, turning the concept over in his mind. It was not like anything in Tandoori philosophy, where collective harmony suppressed individual extremes. Humans did not suppress their darkness. They acknowledged it, lived with it, wielded it when necessary. The truly terrifying thing, Velkith said slowly, is not that you are capable of such violence. No, Danny agreed. The truly terrifying thing is that we are capable of such gentleness despite it. That we choose kindness while carrying the capacity for cruelty. That we could destroy and we don't, most of the time, because we've decided not to. Because you know what you are. Because we know what we are, Danny confirmed. Every human who shows kindness is making that choice against their own nature. Every act of compassion is a victory over the darkness inside us. It's not that we don't have monsters. It's that we keep our monsters on a leash, and we only let them loose when something threatens what we love. Velkith stood and moved to the window, looking out at the stars sliding past. He thought about the battle, about the cold efficiency of Claire Dunham ordering her ship into impossible odds. He thought about Marcus Kane reading poetry in the mess hall. The same hands that had held a weapon now turning pages of beautiful words. The Kethver did not understand this, he said. No, they saw humans laughing and celebrating and being kind. And they thought we were soft. They thought we were prey. Danny's voice hardened. They learned otherwise. And now they are gone. All of them. You did not accept surrender. You did not take prisoners. No. Danny did not try to justify it, did not offer excuses. They killed children, observer. They put their hands on human children, and they killed them. There was no coming back from that. There couldn't be. Velkith understood, in that moment, something fundamental about humanity. Their kindness was not weakness. It was choice. And when someone removed that choice, when someone forced them to confront the monsters they kept caged, those monsters were not restrained by rules of warfare or expectations of mercy. The Kethver had awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. They had paid the price that all enemies of humanity eventually paid. Later that day, Velkith joined the crew for dinner in the mess hall. They made space for him at their table without hesitation, passing dishes of food and including him in their conversation. Katie Price, the young ensign who had lost her father, smiled at him and asked how he was doing. I am processing, he admitted. Your species is difficult to understand. We're difficult for us to understand, too, Pete Cobb said with a rough laugh. Don't feel bad about it. Captain Claire Dunham entered the mess hall and collected a tray of food. She looked better than she had after the battle, though the weight of command still showed in her eyes. When she passed Velketh's table, she paused. Observer, I hope you found what you were looking for. I found more than I expected, Captain, Velkith replied honestly. I am not sure I was ready for it. Claire nodded, something like understanding in her expression. No one ever is. But you stayed. You watched. That takes courage. She moved on to her own table, leaving Velkith to consider her words. That night, Velkith wrote his final report to the Tandoori Collective. He spent hours crafting each sentence, trying to capture the truth of what he had learned. Humans, he wrote, are not the simple monsters that other species believe them to be. They are something far more complex and far more dangerous. They contain within themselves both the capacity for great violence and the capacity for profound kindness. And they choose between these capabilities moment by moment. Day by day. The truly terrifying thing about humans is not their aggression or their strength. Many species possess these qualities. What makes humans unique is their awareness of their own potential for destruction, and their daily choice to be gentle despite it. Every smile from a human carries behind it the knowledge of what that human could do instead. Every act of kindness is a deliberate rejection of the darkness within. But when that darkness is needed, when someone threatens what humans love, they do not hesitate to release it. They have made peace with their monsters. They know exactly what lives inside them, and they will use it without mercy against anyone who harms the innocent. My recommendation to the collective is simple. Remain allied with humanity, not because they are kind, though they are, not because they are reasonable, though they can be, but because I have seen what happens to those who threaten what humans love. The Kethver learned this lesson at Haven's Rest. 200 raiders who thought humans were soft, who believed kindness was weakness, who put their hands on human children. None of them survived. I do not want my people to ever face that terror. I do not want to see what happens when humanity turns its full attention toward an enemy. The Kethver were raiders, poorly organized and easily surprised. If a true enemy ever threatens humanity, if someone truly awakens the monsters that humans keep caged, I fear what the galaxy will witness. Stay on their good side. Accept their friendship. Treasure their kindness. And never, ever give them a reason to show you what else they are capable of. Velkith saved the report and leaned back, exhausted. Outside his window, the stars continued their endless journey through the void. Somewhere out there, other species huddled around their own stars, telling stories about the humans they feared. Now Velkith knew the truth behind those stories. And like all truths, it was both better and worse than the myths. Humans were capable of great beauty and great horror, often in the same breath. They were the most terrifying species in the galaxy, not because of their violence, but because of their kindness. Because kindness from a monster was the most frightening thing of all.